In Noobs in Combat, there are many different mobility types that do vastly different things. From infantry to battle tanks to dive bombers, every unit has a mobility type that you need to be aware of. Let's get started. The very first mobility type I'm going to cover is infantry mobility. Infantry mobility is used by, you guessed it, infantry. Every single unit besides the flame tank in the infantry tree uses this mobility type. The infantry mobility means your unit will always move 2 spaces unless they are trying to get into mountains. This includes going 2 spaces through forested area instead of 1 at a time like most other units. They can also move through allied vehicles. Units with this mobility type have increased sight range while in or around these types of terrain. Finally, they can capture enemy held or neutral buildings and units by standing next to it and moving into it in the coming turn. The exceptions are that the mortar uses this mobility type despite not being in the tree, and the biker kinda half gets it. He has the ability to capture buildings but cannot go through terrain as easily. This, of course, is made up by for technically being wheeled, causing him to have enormous mobility on roads. The next mobility type I will be covering is the towed mobility. Units with this type are either completely immobile or can only move 1 space per turn. As the name suggests, the best way of repositioning towed units is to transport them with other units via towing. This type doesn't really give any benefits, but it should be noted that the units with it are best on defense, as being towed or moving 1 space will cause them to lose their ability to attack that turn. The towed units are the field gun, howitzer, rocket battery, anti-air gun, and anti-air cannon. The tracks, half tracks, and wheels are the 3 mobility types used by the vehicles in the game. Tracks are the simplest. Units using the tracks mobility always go the same amount of spaces as long as they aren't in rough terrain. These units are vehicles, so obviously they will probably be using fuel. The wheels mobility type causes a unit to move much less spaces on terrain, however they then move much more spaces on roads. The best time to use a wheeled vehicle is when you know there are roads on the map you want to play. The half tracks are right in between. Units with this type typically don't have huge mobility by themselves, but gain a little extra when on roads. Same deal, but a bit more versatile. Of course, that also means it has less potential. The ship screw mobility type, I don't know why it's called that, is pretty simple. Every naval unit has it, and they all act pretty similar. There is no fuel with these units, but there also isn't a lot of mobility. I really mean that, by the way. The mobility range is literally 2 to 3 spaces. That's it. Other than that, there isn't much else to ship screw. The air mobility type is obviously used by all aerial units except the armed heli. The air mobility causes units with it to not be able to move 1 to 2 spaces ahead, but can move 3 to their max or stay stationary. This means you need to be careful with how close to your target you're going. If your dive bomber, for example, can almost but not quite reach the place you want to bomb, do not move to max mobility. Next turn, the dive bomber will be too close and therefore has to move too far, wasting very precious time and fuel. The air mobility type also comes with very high amounts of mobility while having low amounts of fuel, meaning these aerial units can get stuff done fast, but you need to be efficient if you want them to get back to an airport or carrier in time. Finally, I want to mention that units with this mobility can only be resupplied when stored in the aforementioned airports and carriers. Every turn they will gain 1 free resupply, which completely regenerates fuel but will only give some of their health back, just like normal resupplies. The last mobility type I'm listing here honestly isn't a huge deal. I say this because really only 1 unit has it. However, to be fair, that unit being the armed heli definitely helps. The landing spots mobility type is used by the armed heli because of its special requirements as a helicopter. Really, this mobility type is just a combination of 2. When landed, the heli is completely defenseless and cannot move. You would only put your heli in this position to refuel it. But when you use the transform heli action, the mobility changes. Now it practically has the air mobility without its main issues. The heli can move wherever it wants in its own range, which, as you know, the other aerial units cannot. This makes it much easier to get to exact positions you want while not thinking too hard and being able to use all your movement tiles. Thanks for watching. However, as it turns out, you guys really liked the idea of shoutouts, so we've got a lot to cover. If you want one in the next video, comment on this video. Anyways, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you later.